You are still watching Tea or Coffee on High Impact Television. If you have not followed us on our social media, this is the time to do so at High Impact TV or High Impact TV UK. That is for all of our social media platforms. And if you want, you can also join our YouTube family and watch all of our interviews on Tea or Coffee. Subscribe to our YouTube family at High-Impact TV and catch up on very insightful and interesting conversations that we've had on this program. Now, I have a question for you. How do you think the world trade is organized? You saw what I did there?
Hey.
Well, really though, how do you think, trade, global trade is actually organized? How is it that, countries, developed countries, developing countries, are able to trade amongst themselves in fairness? There is no bullying. How is it that accountability is ensured in world trade, in global trade, between and amongst countries and even private individuals and countries? This is some of the reasons why the World Trade Organization has been set up. But this morning, we'll be looking at the functions, the roles, and the meaning of the World Trade Organization with a friend of the house and, a profound economist. He's a super researcher in the industry of economy in the person of Dr. Ifeoluwa Ogunrinola. So, World Trade Organization. This conversation also becomes interesting because now one of our own, as in, Dr. Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, is now, the director of the WTO, the World Trade Organization. She has a lot of work to do. And, she has the first thing that she said that she's going to focus on is the economic effects of COVID-19. So, the COVID-19 has lent a dent in the economy of the world because people had to stop going to work for a long time.
Businesses crashed.
Yes, in the UK, for instance, the government is giving out furlough to a lot of people. Because they can't afford to be at work because of the COVID-19 and whatnot. So, a lot of things is happening, globally around, trade, around the economy of, the world. And this is where the World Trade Organization becomes interesting. So now we need to understand what this organization actually does for people at home who probably, they're not sure what does it want
what exactly do they do?
Deal? Yeah.
Just to state this out there, a lot of people didn't know what World Trade Organization was until the conversation started last year when Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala was or may or might not be, the director, that there was that bit of back and forth. I remember when we took it on Trending Topics where she was standing against another female from, I think, Korea.
Lee Moon-kon.
From Korea. And, before she got elected this year, and everybody got happy, and then we wanted to know, okay, so what exactly will she be doing? What is her job? Why is it so important? Why are we making noise? Why are we interested in the fact that a female, an African, and a Nigerian is going to be the director of World Trade Organization? So we're going to get into the conversation this morning. But before we join Ifeoluwa Ogunrinola, we're going to be giving you very quick tips on what it is, and we'll we want to make you understand what World Trade Organization is. But okay, before we do that, we already have Ifeoluwa with us this morning. Good morning, Ife. How are you doing?
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me here.
Thank you very much for joining us this morning. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you very much. And you?
I am great.
Good morning, Dr. Ife. Good to have you again.
Thank you very much.
All right, jumping into the conversation this morning on understanding the World Trade Organization. The first question, obviously, would be, what is World Trade Organization?
Thank you very much. World Trade Organization is an international body. We deal with the rules of trade between nations. The WTO was established in the 1st of January 1995, and it consists of 164 member nations. The main aim of the WTO is to ensure that trade flows, smooth and periodic flow of trade is possible among its member nations, and they're also responsible for helping negotiation of trade among member countries and helping to resolve disputes among these trading partners.
Why is it important that there is a World Trade Organization? Why is it important?
Well, the World Trade Organization is very important because, trading within countries or between countries around the world is an important aspect of livelihood and economic activity. We see that the WTO helps trade negotiations among countries, trading goods, services, and intellectual property. They also help. They are also important because they help countries to liberalize their economies, that is, to open up their economies to allow for free flow of these goods and services across international borders. And as such, they help to come up with policies that lower custom tariffs and other trade barriers.
All right. So, in my research, I found out that there was actually a predecessor, and this is what I was, going to ask Dr. Ife about. And what came before, the World Trade Organization was actually known as the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade.
All right.
So this, was a general agreement among countries, around the world on how tariffs and trade should be. But, taking into the consideration that, we understand that, even when things are set in a constitution of a country, rules are broken one way or the other, because there is no governing body governing these particular rules. So, that's where now the WTO becomes interesting.
Right.
So what came after the general agreements on tariffs and trade was actually the World Trade Organization. Now, the World Trade Organization, picking from what Dr. Ife, just expanding a bit from what Dr. Ife has said, the necessity of why there's a World Trade Organization is to, ensure that this general agreement on tariffs and trade around the world are adhered to. Is to ensure that there is fairness amongst the trade amongst the world. Is to ensure also that developing countries. The World Trade Organization is also there to somehow aid developing countries in when they're trying to come up economically amongst in contrast with other countries. Why is it important that there is a World Trade Organization?
Thank you very much. Like I was saying earlier, trade relations among countries of interest is very important because it ensures the validity of the movement of global supply chains and movement of services and resources from one country to the other. And as such, the ability to monitor and to coordinate these trade relationships or activities is very, very important. We see that the trade negotiations between countries of goods, services, and intellectual property as coordinated by the WTO is one of the main importance of the organization. They ensure that these negotiations between countries occur in a free and fair manner. Of course, when trade occurs, it is possible that disputes emerge. And so the quick resolution of disputes among concerned countries is also an important aspect of the responsibility of the WTO. Of course, we see that the WTO also is involved in the implementation and monitoring of trade activities among these countries. As such, they try to promote transparency among countries that do trade, and they also undergo periodic scrutiny of their trading policies and practices among the countries or member countries of the WTO. We see that the dispute settlement understanding protocol of the WTO is germane to ensuring that smooth trade occurs among countries and no country is left unfairly treated as a result of trading activities.
All right. So what makes the World Trade Organization different from its predecessor, which was known as the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, the GATT? What makes it different?
Yeah, okay. If I got you clearly, are you talking about the GATT?
Yes,
the GATT.
The General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. What makes it different from what we have today in the WTO, the World Trade Organization?
Mm-hmm. We see that the GATT is the organization that came up before the WTO. The WTO came up as an offshoot of the GATT because of some of the downsides of the GATT agreement. A major differentiating factor between the GATT and the WTO is the dispute resolution or dispute settlement protocol. We see that under the GATT, the dispute settlement agreement or understanding was, quite complex, and it took a very long period that countries that are in dispute get quick and fair justice, what we call a day in the court. Okay, so countries were easier or had an easier way to approach the institution organization to bring their matters to the floor of the negotiating table and to get justice accordingly. Also, under the GATT agreement, some rules and regulations that were relatively unfair to less developed countries were reviewed, and such under the WTO we see a higher level of fairness given to a higher level of fairness and representation given to less developed countries or poorer countries vis-a-vis their developed counterparts. So we see that
Ife,
yes,
we can hear you. Ife, I have one more question for you. Now, you know that Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala just got appointed as the Director General of the World Trade Organization. And I mean, everybody's super excited and we're still celebrating her. But now I just want to know, why is this role so important? And what does this mean for us? What does this mean for us as women, as Africans, as Nigerians? And I mean, what is the significance that, she has become the first woman to actually be, the leader for World Trade Organization? How important is this role?
Oh, great. Who is a global finance expert, economist, and international development professional with over 30 years of experience globally, has come in as the new DG.
Ngozi Okonjo-Iweala, popularly known as NOI, and everybody even started the Be Like Ngozi challenge, just so as to give a better representation of what African women can actually achieve and do. And I really just like to know why that role is so important to everybody around the world, just to see that a female is leading the organization and what she would do. The amount of work, you say it a lot, and I'm scared of that. There's a lot of work that she has to do now that she is the Director General of World Trade Organization. But then before we wrap up this conversation, because we actually need to state certain facts, we're going to just run through the basic things that you should know
about the
World Trade Organization. So first, now World Trade Organization, that's the WTO, deals with the rules of trade between nations or a global or near global level. So if anybody asks you what is WTO, you just let them know that it actually deals with the rules of trade between nations and global or near global level.
World trade, basically.
World trade, definitely. World trade. Now, it's an organization for liberating trade. It's a forum for governments to negotiate trade agreements. It's a place for them to settle trade disputes. It operates a system of trade rules. Now, this first basic function of WTO is it facilitates the implementation, administration, and operation, and further the objectives of this agreement and of the multilateral trade agreements, and also provides the framework for the implementation, administration, and operation of the plurilateral trade agreements.
Yes. All right. The second one, the second function or another function of the World Trade Organization is that it provides the forum for negotiations among its members concerning their multilateral trade relations.
Yes. Now, also, another thing that WTO does is that it handles trade disputes by administering the understanding on rules and procedures governing the settlement of disputes, hereinafter referred to as the Dispute Settlement Understanding, or popularly known as the DSU. Another thing that another function of WTO is it monitors, that is monitoring national trade policies by reviewing trade policy mechanism.
All right, and the last two functions that we have from the World Trade Organization, technical assistance and training for developing countries. And then the last one is the cooperation with other international organizations for reconstruction, development, and its affiliated agencies. Essentially the role of the World Trade Organization is to ensure accountability among member nations when it comes to do with trade around the world.
Yes.
There can be there's no, warfare can come in different forms, different shapes and forms.
Yes.
You can have, actual warfare where, people, with the guns and the lives that are lost and whatnot.
Yeah.
You can have economic warfare. You can have cyber warfare.
Yes.
The World Trade Organization is in place to essentially to stop the developments rather of economic warfare, for instance, to stop the development of maybe an economic or a trade disagreement that can lead to very dire consequences like war between nations. So the World Trade Organization is there to ensure accountability between nations, to ensure that one nation is not being cheated over the next or anything like this, essentially. So,
majorly to settle trade disputes and also set rules around trade.
Yes.
So it's important that you know these functions of World Trade Organization.